What's up, guys? This is Carb, CLMA, and my man Zaid over here. So obviously you remember him from being in the gym, or the last time he helped us out with some of the nootropics or some of the cognitive supplements. One of the things that we're really trying to get into is optimizing our supplementation. So we're getting better at nutrition, we're getting better at technique, getting better at fighting, but I think nutrition and supplementation is something that's better for all athletes, whether you compete or not. So he's been helping us out quite a bit. We hope you guys tuned in for the last session that we had. We did an in-person talk. We thought it might be a little bit better to just more film it through like a interview style.
Yeah.
So that way we can get some better footage. We can get the video out to you guys, and then hopefully the sound quality will be a little bit better. We do have people training a little bit in the background because we're a gym. So we'll have some good information. The main two topics going to be for today, you guys should already know, is going to be carbs and it's going to be hydration. These are two super important things. And I'm very excited to have you here answering some of the questions. I will be providing some of the dumb questions, and my man over here is going to be giving us some answers. So how did you want to start?
I've been answering some of your questions, and one of the biggest things is like, how do I time my carbs? How much do I need to take in? And those are two very hard questions to answer right off the bat, because it all depends on what you're trying to do. You would not feed a pro athlete that's a pro marathon runner the same as you would a recreational runner. And you know, your typical guy that's just running on the weekends or something like that, you wouldn't give him the same amount of
What
carbs.
your output were, you know.
Exactly. So I think something that a lot of the difference between somebody that really knows their thing, their nutrition, versus somebody that doesn't, and the talk ends up being usually, okay, are you fueling for the day, or are you fueling for your workout? Yeah. And that's what ends up being like the heaviest thing. Like when you guys,
and how many times are you training too? Are you doing a double day? Are you doing a single day?
All these things start to add up, and they all have to be taken into account. So it's very personalized nutrition that you have to look into, especially for you guys that want to go ahead and make weight for a certain fight. It is super important to have your hydration on point. It is super important to have your carbs. That way you actually have energy when you do go in after potentially being dehydrated for a weigh-in. Hopefully not too much, but that's hopefully what I'm trying to help out with. How to get the fighters to their weight and have them properly hydrated. That way they perform their best, not because the worst thing that you can do is, you know, you cut all the weight, you put in the training, but because you didn't cut your weight properly, you cut out 10% body weight in just water. That could potentially lead to a heart stop. You could get a stroke. Your muscle gets impaired severely. Your performance, especially if you're in this case, striking gets severely impacted. Your cells have less resilience on them, so you're more likely to get hurt. You probably won't perform the way you wanted to, even though you had an amazing training camp. If the hydration is not there, if the fuel is not there, nothing will really matter the day of the fight. And it's sad to say, but that's how important hydration is. So I just wanted to get you guys some numbers that I have, but you know, there's a lot of information, so I'm going to try to pack as much as I can.
Perfect.
So one of the first things that people ask me is like, okay, so how much do I need to fuel? Yeah. First of all, there's been a lot of studies as of lately, like the literature has been increasing dramatically in the consumption of carbs. How much carbs do you consume? And right now, since this is a striking, and also kind of it's endurance, so there's a lot of power, like a lot of explosive energy mixed with cardio. You guys are right down the middle. So you guys as athletes have to be right at the razor's edge between not overtraining and not undertraining, because the adaptation has to happen for you to keep on progressing. But if you overtrain, you can potentially get injured quite easily, and especially since you guys are striking all the time. This is just inevitable. It's basically how the sport works. Yeah. It's literally how it is. So one thing that sports scientists have been finding in a lot of recent papers, especially within the last 10 years, a lot more sports nutrition scientists have been looking into the fact of how to fuel with carbs. And let me just get this out of the way, which is usually the baby talk. Why are we doing keto? Are we doing carnivore? Are we doing vegetarian? Are we doing vegan? If all of those were predominant in all these sports in comparison to very heavy carb athletes, you would see all the top athletes, all of them, in the Olympics, everywhere, they would probably be keto. They would probably be carnivore. They would probably be that. Yeah. Unfortunately, they are the outliers. Yeah. They are the outliers that have found something very particular that they have managed to tweak. And that's a completely different conversation for a completely different day.
I think on the whole, it's like as a team philosophy, we are not all about that keto life. For me, I think that's a very specific situation from somebody that works very specific to that individual and their diet and their lifestyle choice. But I feel like on the whole,
if you're
carbs are king.
Yes, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're somebody, again, the weekend warrior that's trying to lose some fat and, but it's not putting optimal performance. We're talking about optimal performance here.
That's a good indicator,
Yeah, like that, go ahead. Keto sounds like a really good idea. But if you want to, like in this case, really, beat the guy in front of you, like you have to be on top of it. All the cylinders have to be firing. And carbs are the proven way over and over that it just works, However, in the past 10 years, there's a lot of research papers that have been coming out, and particularly one research paper that has noted before it was said that you had to have per every 60 minutes of working out, of intense working out, and I'm talking like, your typical marathon runner, your typical sprinter, 1 gram carb per minute of activity. So that was the indicator. But they started realizing that they wanted to even optimize that. How can we get these people to ingest more carbs? That way they can fuel even more. So what they started doing is they started mixing in glucose, which is your regular carbs, with fructose, with fruit glucose, basically. And they started realizing that the uptake was dramatic. Like the power output was so much more. So for the regular people that were just doing glucose or your fast-acting carb like a croissant, something like that, they ended up outputting 9% of like above their regular.
The regular baseline. No, I was laughing because I feel like you talk to some people and they're like, carbs, like white bread and like rice, right? And they're like, you can also get carbs from like veggies and like fruit. They're like, wait, fruit has carbs? Like I just having conversations with some of the fighters is adorable.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you got regular carbs like that, that's just regular glucose. But then from fruit, you get fructose, which is what you usually see in a lot of labels. A lot of times, if you have like a Gator or something like that, you'll see corn syrup, you'll see a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden you see fructose. That is coming from a fruit or something that's been modified genetically at some point. But in any case,
high fructose corn syrup.
Yes. So the athletes that got fueled with both regular glucose and fructose, their performance was 17% versus the group that only got the glucose, which was 9%. That's almost half. Like, that's almost double the amount of the output in comparison to the other team. So, and a lot of athletes were also thinking, well, if I'm a bigger athlete, am I able to drink more than this amount? They realized that the person's size does not matter. The gut is the limiting factor. So, which is why they started doing these tests. They're like, we can't put more into the athlete because then you guys have gastrointestinal problems, and then that starts becoming an issue, and people start puking, and you guys don't want that at all.
Not ideal for sparring.
So they came out with the formula of the ideal amount is for guys, it's 1.1 grams per
minute of activity.
Per minute of activity, and being able to potentially push 60 to 80 grams within that amount of an hour. And for women, it's 1 gram still.
Okay.
Like,
it's almost the same. But
almost the same, correct. And usually in women, it used to be a little bit lower, just because, again, the gut is the limiting factor in the situation, or that's what the science has found.
Do you know if there's a difference between, like, let's say hypothetically we have like Julian versus like Jacob, right? So you have somebody who's in the ballpark of like 180, 175 pounds, and somebody who's like 125 pounds. Do you feel like that makes a difference too in like the carb consumption you're going to be taking?
Oh, and that's the other thing. This does not take into account whatever their daily regimen is. Whatever their daily regimen is, they have their caloric expenditure, and if we want to go ahead and like train smartly, you got to have your bases well set out. So if you think about it as a little bit of a pyramid, the best way to think about it, at the very bottom of the pyramid, you have your nutrition, you have your sleep, and you have your basically your stress level.
Yeah.
It is super important. Right now I've been going through a little bit of a situation, and I'm starting to notice that even though I'm getting as much sleep as I can, even though I'm getting my nutrition on point, my sleep, everything's good, my stress has been very through the roof, and I just haven't had the energy. And I've never faced that ever in my life. I've never been to a day where I'm like, it's perfectly sunny at 78 degrees outside, and then I just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
So your mind's got to be at that point. So that is the basis. And then with what we were covering right before, the next thing is your training plan. Your training plan's got to be there. Your training plan has to be well thought about. The periodization, like what are we going to be training in this block? You know, if you're going to be dividing it into like some kind of like trimester or a 6 months kind of a situation, optimizing that plan. Or hey, we're planning for a fight. Okay, this is how we're going to start. We're going to start you off building up some muscle. You potentially have to go up a weight class. Then we're gonna, start working on optimizing that muscle by really working on technique. Yeah. And then the last couple of weeks we start cutting out, some of that fat, or throughout the plan. But at that point you already have your nutrition and your plan well set out. So that's the next part of the pyramid. Then right after is monitoring. How is the athlete doing throughout that entire period? Are they having enough carbs? Are they feeling okay? Do they have enough energy? Do they feel dehydrated? Do they feel like their head hurts? Or are they not focused when they're fighting? Some of these are all indicators that the coaches tend to pick up. And when you have a good coach, they really pick up on this. It's like, hey, you know what? Today's not going to help you. Don't work out today. Take the day off and come back the next day. That's what's going to help you more. You need to rest. Again, take care of that base. Rest to recover and manage your stress. Then right after that, you got a bunch of little treatments. Are you going to go get a sports massage? Are you going to go get all these things? Like those are treatments that do help, but they help in a very minor way. Supplementation, stuff like that. It adds up, but it does help, but not as big as the bottom of that foundation. If your sleep and everything at the bottom, and I've said it a couple of times, is not ready, and your training plan is just garbage, it doesn't matter how many supplements you do. And then at the bottom of the top of the pyramid, you can say are things like ice baths, using the sauna,
CBD oil,
all that stuff. Those are like the last treatments that you would have. So having said that foundation has to be set. Like that nutritional foundation, everything has to be set. This is for intra, pre, and post nutrition optimization for those athletes. That's what you want. Okay. So if they are training, you can have these little extra bouts of carbs. Let's say it's race day. You have to go do a marathon. You're going to be fueling throughout that marathon, but how much do you put into your body without feeling like you're going to puke? Same thing is with a fighter. What are you allowed to actually give these fighters when they're in the ring? Are you allowed to give them anything other than water?
Strictly water,
It's only water, right?
Strictly water from a clear bottle.
Correct. So the nutrition post and pre are essential. So right after the weigh-in, I would imagine it'd be a good time to go ahead and give them plenty of electrolytes, plenty of carbs, almost zero to no fat, and I'll tell you why for right now, and a good amount of protein. That way they don't lose muscle. And it's good for them. It helps them break everything down a lot easier, especially since they're not going to be getting any fat. The reason why I wouldn't add fat to that is because you guys have been cutting weight for the past couple of weeks, so that potentially means that your fat levels have been diminished, or your fat consumption has been diminished. And if you go ahead and give somebody fats immediately, that can potentially cause some distress in the stomach, and off it is to the restroom with you guys. I
think that's a big issue that some of our fighters have as soon as they get done with the weight cut. So most of them are pretty good. Like whatever you've been eating normally, you kind of stick to that. Just increase the volume, increase more carbs, increase more protein. But some people, they'll get excited and they'll think of like sugar and desserts or like anything like that. And they'll start throwing that into their body. And it's basically like they've been super disciplined for 2 months. And as soon as like the day before the fight happens, they're so hungry, and then they kind of like not spoil it, but they end up all night on the toilet because they're eating like fats or too much dairy and things like that.
And it's happened to me. I did a 5-day fast once, and immediately I was like, yeah, let's go eat. I ate a piece of steak, and I was attached to that restroom for a couple of hours. And it's just how it works. Your body cannot handle that amount of fat all of a sudden, especially again if you're doing an aggressive cut. So it is very crucial, and not only crucial for your, let's say you feel okay throughout the fight and you never get that distress. It's also very important to replenish that electrolyte, those electrolytes. Electrolytes are super important, and the 5 ones that you will mostly hear of are sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and chloride. Those are the main ones. You have something called the sodium-potassium pump that is very important. So the best way, what I like to think about is to kind of understand how electrolytes work. You have sodium and potassium that tend to work together. A lot of the times they perform something called the sodium-potassium pump. So if you think about it, it's what helps you contract your muscle. So that signal, the sodium-potassium, if you think about it from your head when you think about it, it sends it down to your muscle. Let's say it's sending it to the bicep. You want it to contract. The sodium-potassium pump goes ahead and sends that signal. And then you have chloride. The chloride will go ahead and go into the muscles through the end of something called axons. Will go into the muscle and will contract the muscle. And now you have magnesium. Magnesium is what's going to cause it to release, to relax. That it's going to cause that muscle relaxation. So all these electrolytes have a different purpose. And you might say, well, what does chloride do? Chloride helps get water into the muscle cells, into the cells, actually. So that's why it's super, super important. So that when you see sodium chloride is not what you need. You need sodium, which is usually what you fight. So let me rephrase that. When you see table salt, you see sodium chloride. That's how it is. Only 40% of 1 gram of that is actually sodium. The rest is a bunch of minerals. So that's why pink Himalayan salt. So that's why they're like, oh, go ahead and consume pink Himalayan salt, all this stuff. It's not that it's bad, but it's not full sodium. If you want to get full sodium, get sodium chloride tablets or something like that. But the sodium chloride will help you hydrate in that sense. It'll go ahead and let more water into the cells, which will keep them hydrated. Which is one of the ways that works.
I feel like that's what's fascinating, because you always hear about electrolytes, and then you kind of have a base understanding of like what electrolytes you need in your body. But I don't think most of us, I don't think I understood at all like what each of like the breakdown for the different components of the electrolytes actually do. And I feel like if you understand it that way, you're way more prone to actually take the electrolytes, as opposed to somebody saying, take electrolytes, you get more hydrated. What does that mean? I don't know, man, but like just take the electrolytes. Like I feel like even just like understanding like the cues and like what it's doing to your body, like am I cramping up? Okay, there's probably a deficiency in this area. I don't feel like I'm retaining weight. I feel like I'm just, the water's coming out. What do I do? I feel like that was super, super helpful for the weight cuts that we've been doing, especially the tournaments. The tournaments is like, you got to have everything so dialed in.
Yeah, and that is, I think that is very important, and like empowering the athletes that way they understand, because ultimately it's just like any diet. You can go ahead and start off any diet, but you will not keep on using that diet unless you want to go ahead and comply. And why would you want to take a drink if you don't understand it? You know, they just told you to take it, you take it, yes sir. But at one point you might not have enough money, and you might say, you know what, I'm not going to go ahead and buy that. But if you know how big of a deal it does, especially again, if you're somebody that's a recreational athlete, you might not have to supplement with this kind of stuff. But if you're a professional athlete, you are sweating like crazy, you are using so much sodium, so much potassium, more than the average person. Have you guys ever felt like you guys have like your fingers, the tip of your fingers are numb? That is you actually not having enough potassium. That's what that is like. Oh, why don't I feel this? Or your hands start shaking all of a sudden. That's also a signal of that.
Potassium deficiency.
Yeah, potassium deficiency. Or sometimes if you guys go to sleep at night and you can actually hear your heart thumping, and you're like, God, it's really loud. It's really loud, and I'm completely calm. It's actually a sign of potassium deficiency.
Interesting.
It tends to be. There could be other things, but that's usually what.
We're not doctors, okay? So if you got a problem, go ahead and talk to a doctor. But that's interesting. That's interesting, because I feel like the cramping is the biggest one that we hear a lot of, especially towards like even if it's like it gets hot out pretty quick, and then people aren't like rapidly, hydrating effectively. People start cramping up in classes. Like when we were in Thailand training, it's like literally we had an entire class, like 75% of people were just cramping up. There was a time we had to completely shut down the entire class, and all the trainers basically just like throwing Thai oil on us and then trying to like rub out calves. And we were just taking hydration tabs all the time and just, but still, it just wasn't enough. So like when it gets hot, I feel like just constantly trying to replenish electrolytes and drinking more water. So speaking on that, so I think we were talking before about, I think one of the things that we get a hiccup on is, we look at things from the recommended daily value, right? So for example, it's like if our sodium intake is like 2 grams, 2,000 milligrams of sodium is recommended for like the daily allotted value. I think carbs, what you were kind of alluding to, is like you have your daily recommended value based on your normal daily life, your normal output, and you're training on top of that, like the 60 grams hypothetically, or 6.6, whatever that is, like that's the additional amount for that additional workout. So you're gonna have your regular carbs, and then you're gonna have additional on top of that. So let's say you're training like twice a day, kind of on the regular, like you're heavy into camp. How much sodium should I be taking in essentially?
So I cannot speak for everybody out there because, like I said, your output is completely different from my output. You hold pads here for a lot of these guys, so you're sweating consistently, but you're not using as much power as I do. So my regular day is a little bit different in the sense that I go do work that's very physical. Then right immediately after that, I'll go ahead and I'll run 3 miles. It's my daily thing that I go ahead and do. Right after that, I do some Olympic lifting. That is very intensive on the nervous system, maybe not on my muscles to an extreme, but it's very heavy. So I require a good amount of carbs, and since it's very explosive, I require more than the average person, say just running 3 miles, maybe at a 9-minute pace, versus a person if they were running 7-minute miles. Like that takes a completely different level of glycogen. You need to top everything off, especially if you want to be able to perform that way. So I do that, and then right after I'll go ahead and I'll have a meal, and after that then it's almost the day almost ends. Then I come in here and I train with you guys, and that's when you see me. By that point I have already had a session or 2 in. So the amount of calories that I'm consuming in a day right now, I'm actually in a little bit of a caloric deficit, is about 3,000 calories, and a lot of people would say that's a lot of calories.
But if you're burning, then
But I am burning, exactly. And that's why I'm really, really dark skinned right now, because I was running just yesterday. And because of the humidity, the heat that's coming around San Diego right now, that's hitting San Diego, I had to up my carbs and my hydration considerably. Because I felt it yesterday. Immediately after my run, I was like, okay, I felt that run. So from 3,000 calories that I would normally intake, what I needed to do is I'm gonna add an extra 100 to 150 until my body adapts, so I can go ahead and just replenish it with electrolytes. And not just plain water, because plain water does not replenish anything. Your body tries to keep this balance of electrolytes that it has in there. So if you give it too much water, like those guys that carry around the jug all the time, and they don't put anything on it, their body tries to keep this balance of electrolytes. So what it does, you drink it, and it's your kidneys are working super hard to keep that balance. So it'll just excrete.
It'll just drop right out.
It'll drop right out, and it'll take some electrolytes with it. So you're actually taking out electrolytes out of your body by just drinking plain water. So that's why you are also thirsty again, because your body is losing more and more and more and more. And there's people that have actually died because of this. It's called hyponatremia. So people actually drink a lot of water, and they actually die. It was happening to a lot of athletes, especially in the 90s, 2000s. It was happening, and they were like, okay, we got to look into this. Which is why also sports science has been advancing, especially. And this paper was actually calling out for that. It's hyponatremia is a thing. If you feel thirsty, you potentially dehydrated, but don't just drink water. Go ahead and in your water put in some salt, a good amount of salt. For athletes, it's different. I tend to go ahead and consume about 10 grams of salt every day, and if it's too hot, like yesterday,
that's a lot for most people.
I ended up consuming about 15 grams, which is a lot. Especially if you're somebody that eats super clean, it is very hard to get these numbers in. It is not easy. Literally, you would have to grab a piece of orange and just dip it in salt and eat it, which every now and then I actually do. But I know it helps me out. And if you ever feel sometimes you're at the gym, you ate properly and you're good, and then you're throwing a punch or something, you're like, why is this not moving or contracting properly?
Yeah.
You're probably deficient, and especially if you like ran the day prior, was super hot. Humidity has to be taken into account.
Yeah.
What you did the day before, all of that.
I think that's why, especially right now while we're filming this, it's like we have this like, you know, what's that, the Santa Ana heat wave that kind of comes in. It's like dry, or it's humid.
I'm
kinda going
sweating
back and
as
forth.
I'm sitting here.
Yeah. So I think it's like, you know, what we say is like, oh, it's a time change. Oh, it's the heat. And so we kind of think that the heat makes us tired, but it's like we're getting dehydrated. It's more taxing on the body. And then, you know, we use kind of like these key words like, oh, I feel really flat today. But really what it is like, maybe I need more carbs. Like maybe I need higher caloric intake today. Maybe it's like I'm sweating more, and so I'm losing a little bit more electrolytes. I'm not replenishing those fluids. Like obviously the heat has a factor, but it's a little bit more complicated on the system in terms of like how you fix that problem.
Correct.
Yeah.
So usually it's either or. If your food is on point, if your carbs are on point, it might be your electrolytes. It might be like you are just sweating like crazy. And I know a lot of fighters, your metabolism is through the roof.
Yeah.
So you guys are sitting and half of you guys are like sweating like crazy.
Yeah.
Like make sure you're replenishing that with electrolytes, not just water. There's a good brand called LMNT.
Mm-hmm.
They have a really good ratio because nobody agrees on the ratio right
Yeah.
now. The literature does not agree on the ratios. They can only provide you with guidelines,
Yeah.
but nobody has an exact thing that they go to all the time. So what you usually see is drinks have very low sodium amounts, decent amounts of magnesium, and low potassium, and they're not even the best forms of these. So what LMNT did was actually pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
They do 1,000 milligrams of sodium, which is great, and then you have like 200 of potassium, and then 100 of magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a 5-to-1 ratio on the potassium, and sodium to potassium, and then sodium to magnesium 1-to-10. So that's actually something that I found that works pretty well. That combination works really well, and if I was able to buy LMNT unlimited, I'd probably go through like 10 of those a day.
Yeah. Because I mean, these things aren't cheap, so I think part of it is trying to figure out like, okay, based on my needs, here's kind of the product that'll help me out. Because I think that's one of the key things too. Because I think what people want, which isn't good, is they want to say like, well, just tell me what to take and I'll take it, right? But the problem with that is like it depends on the individual, it depends on how much you sweat. So for example, for our team training sessions, they're about an hour and a half long. Brendan Rafferty will come in, and in that hour and a half, Jorge, Jeremy Shepard, they'll come in and they'll burn 2,000 calories in that hour and a half. They're just hummingbirds, they're killing it, their bodies work a certain way. But then other people will come in and they'll burn 700 calories. So like the needs of one person isn't necessarily the needs of the other person. So I think a lot of it is like trying to figure out like what are the actual components of electrolytes that you need. I think what are some of the indicators that you might be deficient, and then really just trying to do your own self-study in terms of taking different amounts and then seeing how that kind of optimizes your own body.
Correct.
It's like there's a couple supplements that we really like that we found. One of them is Catalyst from Thorne. Has it's a really good mix of all different things, but it's a lot of really good electrolytes in there. The mix is really good. It's got maybe 485 grams of sodium in it, so it's a pretty decent boost. A little bit more like economical as SIS tablets. We'll use those too. We just throw them in drinks, but it's got a pretty good mix. The sodium content's only like maybe like 350. It's a little bit lower. And then if you're really deficient, like for fighters, we've gone through every single thing. Banana bags. We've gone through liquid IVs, all these different things. But the highest one I've ever seen, I think, is like 1,800 milligrams of sodium, and it's in a product called The Right Stuff. So if you're really deficient, if you're out there outside hiking all day, if you're doing 2-a-days and you're like, I just need to get more sodium in my system. If you cut weight, and then after the weight cut, you need to get a lot of sodium in your body. If you pick up The Right Stuff, it's not cheap, but that we find that one is like the highest content. That's also not disgusting. At the same time,
because that's also a big thing. Sodium is one of those supplements or one of those electrolytes that if you drink a lot of it real quick, try getting a salt cap in
you
and then
will feel
drinking.
terrible and you'll have diarrhea.
You will have diarrhea, explosive diarrhea, mind you. Like this, we can.
And then the whole process just backfires.
Exactly. Especially, trust me, I did that once while I was doing a marathon, and that wasn't great. Yeah. And I was like, I'm gonna finish. I ran to
Which
the
is
restroom.
dangerous, man.
Hey, I got there.
Yeah.
I made it happen. That was the best part. But let's say if you're doing a hike or something like that, just make sure to go ahead and just on your jug of water, if you're going to be taking your jug of water, make sure you put sodium, potassium, magnesium. You can buy these supplements separately, which is what I do, or you can find a supplement that already has a combination of all of these. They usually all have sodium, potassium, magnesium. Yeah. There's different forms of that, but we would have to go through a bunch of stuff, and this is already getting a little lengthy as it is. Yeah. Just know what you're looking for is sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Sodium usually is bonded with sodium chloride, so you should be good there, and calcium. We get it in our diet in a lot of things, so you don't need to worry about that. But know that you have to have good ratios of that. Don't feel bad if you're over consuming salt. I think a lot of people get shamed into don't eat salt, don't drink salt, don't get like as much salt into your diet. If you're an athlete that works out, that sweats a lot, yes, try to get the right salt in though. Pink Himalayan salt is a good place to start, I believe. There is better salts with better nutritional profiles in them, and I think one that I use, which is I literally buy it by the bucket. There's a little bucket on Amazon.
Is it the real salt?
Redmond Real Salt. It has a really good profile. It doesn't come from the sea. It's actually mined, which right now that's one of the biggest things, like Pink Himalayan salt and a bunch of other salts like Celtic salt, volcanic salt. There's a lot of microplastics and a lot of things like that. So if you guys are worried about like just the purity of your product, Redmond Real Salt is a really good salt. I drink it and it's great for salting food. You guys might have noticed if you guys do the cooking, Pink Himalayan salt, you have to use a lot of it to salt anything. Mm-hmm. The Redmond Real Salt tastes great. Okay. And you use a little bit and it's like, ooh, it actually tastes like salt.
And if you're cutting weight, do not use Pink Himalayan sea salt. We learned that the hard way. We did that for about 2 years, and people had a little bit of stomach issues. As soon as you switch off to tabs, SIS tabs, and the other stuff, we had zero problems whatsoever. So we learned that the hard way. Don't cut weight and then recharge with Pink Himalayan sea salt for food. Stick to that.
And the takeaway with carbs, I think, is the amount of carbs that you're going to be eating or consuming throughout the day have to be preset in accordance with what you're spending throughout the day. So if you have a plan, you're going to be training 5 days a week, let's just say for example, and you have pretty like 2 intense days and 3 like a little bit more relaxed days. The intense days better have more carbs on them. You fuel for the day, don't fuel for ahead of time. That's something that most people like kind of.
Some people like they do a refuel on Sunday for their carbs, and they think it'll last throughout the week, but it doesn't work out that way. Yeah.
It does not. Yeah. It helps out a little bit for the next like workout or so, but if you're doing 2 a days, your body will go through it so quick. You got to be on top of your nutrition, guys. So let's say you had a easy day, hard day, easy day, hard day, easy day. The way that you fuel for the easy day is not going to be the same as the hard day. It's just not. If not, you're going to gain weight, because you're not using that same caloric. You're not expending those calories on that day. So make sure you're aware of that. Once you have all that set, you worked out your plans, I'm going to be doing 2 a day, and I'm going to be fueling properly for those. Then you can start working around, hey, I don't feel like, I feel like sometimes I'm a little wobbly. I'm having some sessions that are better than others. That's when you can start thinking about intra workouts, which is during your workout, making sure that you have maybe a little extra boost of carbs or pre.
Especially if you're breaking an hour, when you're getting into like hour and a half, especially if you're doing 2 classes in a row, like that intra carb reloads are huge. Like they'll save your life.
So that's a question that I've gone actually. Like, what if you have one class and then back to back you have another one? Like, it is a little dumb to tackle the other class if you don't have anything in between, because now you're just pushing your body in a very excessive way, and you're just gonna be running on fumes.
You're burning muscle, like your cortisol levels are gonna be like driving up. So like you think that I'm doing 2 classes, I'm gonna be losing more weight because I'm burning more calories. But it's like if you're not fueling properly, your body's basically what the hell are you doing? You're gonna start burning more muscle.
And this is where fitness and nutrition start separating, like fitness, nutrition, and well-being. There's a point where you start pushing your body. So fitness is the power of being able to do something for a specific task. So I'm fit at Muay Thai. I'm fit at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm fit at that. That doesn't mean you're healthy. And the more elite you become, the more elite level athlete, the further you actually get away from being healthy. And that's when doing like 2-a-days, like back to back, something like that. That's where if you're gonna be fueling properly just to become a better athlete, to become better at your sport, you're gonna need to put something that is actually probably not great for you. So simple carbs, something that's gonna absorb real quick in your body. And that's when maybe the cupcakes, the simple sugar, which is terrible to say. And I hate saying
fuel.
It's gonna be your fuel because that's what's gonna be that's what your body's gonna be able to break down and go into your muscle the fastest.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the coconut water, which is a better option, in my opinion.
Don't eat cupcakes.
Don't eat cupcakes.
Coconut water. Can we please? So one of the things, like, I was a monster with like Zions and caffeine and all these things. But some of the things that saved my life is basically just like switching over to different supplementation. And then Vitargo is so much better. I was doing waxing mace before,
Yeah.
but Vitargo it like completely saved my life. So can you talk a little bit about like the components for Vitargo?
Vitargo just goes into the muscle so much more fast, like so much faster. So again, you got guys at the lab that are finding, how can we like fuel these athletes way faster? It takes like 5 minutes. No, we need like now, like kind of a situation. And that's what Vitargo does. So let's say you have a training session right now, and you're like, okay, I have a protein shake along with Vitargo ready. Right after class, I'm going to down that, and it's going to be like 5 minutes while I get ready for my next class, 5-10 minutes, while I get ready for my next class. That is going to go so quickly into your muscles that you're going to have that energy available. It becomes a lot easier to absorb than, again, if you had oatmeal right after. Your body has to break that down, and then it has to become available to your muscles or to become glycogen. It has to go through a whole process.
I think that's like a common misconception. People like they'll have oatmeal in the morning, or they'll have like a PB&J like an hour or 2 hours before their workout, and they think they're getting access to those carbs when they're working out in the morning, and like 100% that's not happening.
And if you are going to be feeling a little bit like that, the best way to do it is prior to your workout. If you're going to be like, let's say for whatever reason, because it does happen, like you just got off of work and you're like, hey, I'm gonna be at the gym in like 10 minutes. I wasn't able to eat. Down a fruit, whatever it is, or something within 15 minutes of your workout. That way it doesn't go into fat storage. Because if not, your body will potentially, like, most likely store it into fat. But that's when you can use something like a quick carb, or you can use a fruit, or a combination of both, as we talked about earlier, would be ideal. Because now you're just replenishing, not only are you replenishing your muscle glycogen, you're also replenishing your liver, your liver fructose levels, which is where a lot of fructose actually kind of stays in comparison to regular glucose.
I think just that kind of reminded me. So we talked a little bit about carbs. We talked a little bit about like some different types of carbs. Mix and matching is ideal. Theoretically, if you're working out at a high pace for X amount, how many more carbs should you be adding into your diet? Some of the ways you can get fast-acting carbs if you're just getting off work. That's a big thing too. A lot of people they'll do what is it called, intermittent fasting, which basically means you were too busy to have breakfast, and then they'll have lunch, and then they're like, why am I so tired? I intermittent fasted all morning and drank nothing but coffee, and then had one meal, but now I'm tired. So having that extra carb, I think when you're on the way from work to your training session will help out a lot. But I think when it comes to electrolytes, like, what are your thoughts on the timing for electrolytes? So, for example, like, do I electrolyte and bump before? Do I do it afterwards? Do I do it during?
Electrolytes, I think, again, if we're talking about electrolytes, if you are somebody that's not the weekend warrior, if you're the weekend warrior, you replenish a lot of these electrolytes through your food and throughout the day. And if you do one little session, you shouldn't be thinking crazily about electrolytes. But that means if you're discussing electrolytes and optimization to that level, that means you're an elite level athlete, or you're doing 2-a-days.
Or you're training like an elite level.
Exactly. Or you're training like an elite level athlete. So when you're talking about electrolytes in that way, a good way to fuel for your workout, that means you gotta plan things out. An hour prior to your workout is the ideal time to start like throwing just electrolytes into your body slowly. Like just grab something to drink and slowly drink it out, and just make sure you have your carb levels topped off 15 minutes prior with, again, a fruit or something, and that's good. And then if you feel like you're still a little out of it, drink a little bit during, because they found out that even just sipping carbs, washing them through your mouth and then spitting it out, activates that sign, that gut like energy, like brain gut connection, that it signals your brain like, oh,
we're getting food.
We're getting food.
Yeah, there's the meal
Exactly.
coming.
Even just throwing it into your mouth and spitting it out like
So
activates
crazy.
that, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so trust me, like
But if
it
you're
does
looking
a
at
big
pictures,
thing.
if you look at a picture of like a Thanksgiving meal, like would that like help you out? No, you have to like taste it.
I think that might just make you like until we do scratch and sniff like turkey.
It makes me think of like when we're in hotels before fights, and all the fighters are sitting there just like hungry, waiting for weigh-ins, and we're all just like watching Food Channel. It's like
Yeah, it would be. I need to see that. But I mean, you have like the most aggressive people on earth, like all sitting there, and you're like eating in front. Yeah. Be smart.
Not a
But yeah,
cool.
that like an hour prior to your workout, just make sure everything's good. You're taking in some electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium being the main ones. If you want to go in a little bit deeper, a little bit of sulfate, boron, which a lot of people tend to be deficient on, but that's a topic for another day. That's something you can look for in your replenishing drink that you're taking. That's what I take, and it helps out very well.
Cool.
So that, and then post workout, if you have another session close by, let's say you did this training in the morning at 10 o'clock, obviously you were feeling like around 9 o'clock, you started to drink those electrolytes at 10 o'clock. That's when you started working out from 10 to 11, let's say, and then you have another training session at, let's say, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, during that time that you're not working out, your job as an athlete, is to replenish those electrolytes, because you will have lost a lot of electrolytes during that bout, and if you're going into the next workout without proper electrolyte replenishment, your body's just going to be decimated.
Yeah.
You will potentially lose muscle. You potentially won't even contract your muscles properly. You won't move properly, and the more dehydrated you are, like the more dangerous it can get.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might look a little leaner. Your six pack might pop out a little bit more, but it sometimes gets to the point where it's like I can't even contract the muscles of my six pack. Like you're just like, oh, I just feel so flabby.
Yeah.
Like you said, I feel flat.
Yeah.
That's probably what that is.
Yeah.
But if I can guarantee you, if you go ahead and take some sodium in, get a good amount of sodium in before, you'll start seeing those pumps happening.
Yeah.
Real quick. So yes, take the time to fuel between your next session. Take some electrolytes during the day, and then prior to that session, once again, put in like a good amount of electrolytes, and you should be good. And then if you're gonna have another intense day, the next day immediately after, let's say now another session in the morning, because sometimes you get one back to back to back. Like sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
Make sure that night, again, immediately after that workout, you start to fuel out, and then you plan, okay, I'm gonna need to have enough carbs for tomorrow morning session, and be ready for that.
Cool,
So,
super helpful. Yeah, I think just to recap real quick, I think some ideas for supplementation, because I think a lot of people think of like the what, and then I think the last thing, if we can finish it before we finish up, is just like the indicators. So meaning the supplements that we take, and then reminder that like if you want to know how your actual levels are, and if you are deficient in potassium, if you're deficient in chloride, it's like you need to get your blood test taken. Like you need to actually, like it's hard to know. There's indicators for it, but it's not like there's like a tuning fork and you can tell if their levels are off. So I think just getting your actual blood tested, and then you can see which levels you're deficient in, and then you can supplement kind of accordingly. I think is pretty important. Like especially if you're doing like a heavy training week, and then your blood level is taken, and then you can actually see where you need to be supplementing extra.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great thing, because a lot of fighters don't test out where their B vitamins are, which are super important. Vitamin A, like all these vitamins, all these extra nutrients, these micronutrients that you require to work out. Like as an athlete, it's your job to be on top of that. And if you need help with that, I mean, that's what Carl's here for. And if you guys have any questions, I could potentially go ahead and steer you in the right direction. That way you can go ahead and get that help, because it's very important, and it's ultimately going to affect you. It's ultimately going to affect your performance. So be on top of that, and I think that's the ultimate thing. Just be aware that if you need anything, you can come to us as resources, and we can potentially guide you in the right direction. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and then we'll probably attach onto the email a couple of the recommendations for the supplements. We get $0 from anything. We're not selling anything. We're just trying to like give out good info. But I think that for the athletes that have been attacking hydration, attacking nutrition, attacking supplementation, we've seen a massive boost in their output, their overall health. I think cortisol levels, and then just like their overall like enjoyment for training and life as a whole. So we'll attach some of the products that we recommended earlier. And then if you guys have questions too, make sure you guys let us know, and then hopefully we can kind of pass them on and get some more information to you. Perfect.
Well,
Cool.
thanks for having me.
Thank you for your information.
Yeah, sir.
We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Go Steel.
All right, thanks, guys. Next one's going to be on sleep, which my man over here is super passionate about. I have kids, so I don't sleep too much, but I think he's going to convince me to sleep more, convince
Yeah.
everybody to sleep more, hopefully, and then we'll all live happier, longer, healthier, less sarcastic lives. So tune in, guys, for the next one on sleep.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.